Hi all, it's Miss Gross. Today we're going to go over our number system guided notes. For this, you'll need your red notebook and you're going to need your guided notes glued into your red notebook for number system. There's these, and then there's also decimals, which will be glued onto a separate page. So let's go ahead and get started. Remember, you can pause the video anytime to write down if I'm going too fast. You can go back and rewatch any of these that you need to, or you can also, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. So let's go ahead and get started. So integers using a number line. Picture a number line. When you're adding integers, the first number tells you where to start. And when you add a positive integer, you can add it by moving to the right. When you're adding a negative integer, you want to move to the left. So positive goes to the right and negative goes to the left. When you are subtracting integers, you want to subtract it by adding its additive inverse. And if you wouldn't mind writing off to the side here, add the opposite. You're going to hear me say that quite a bit, add the opposite. When you're multiplying integers, multiplication is really just skip counting. The first number tells you how many times to skip, and the second number tells you what to skip count by. And you learned that when you were in elementary school, but we are going to be using negatives, and it still works with the same way. When you're dividing integers, division is really skip counting backwards to 0. The first number tells you where to start, so you're obviously going to start at a really bigger or smaller number, and then you're going to skip count to 0 by the second number, and the answer will be the number of jumps that you made. And we'll do some practice in class on this. The next thing I want to go over is absolute value. Absolute value is the distance from 0 on a number line. The absolute value of any number is always positive. So for example, the absolute value of -4, and those bars mean absolute value. The absolute value of -4 is 4, meaning that -4 is 4 spaces away from 0. Same thing, the absolute value of +4 is still 4 because it's 4 spaces away from 0. And just a reminder, whenever you see a negative sign, that just means opposite of. So absolute value is how far away it is from 0. So -4 is opposite of +4, and they're both 4 spaces away from 0. Go ahead and go to the next part where we're adding and subtracting fractions. When you're adding and subtracting fractions, you must find a common denominator. You've done this back in elementary school, but again, we're going to be using negative numbers this year. Find a number that both denominators will go into. Whatever you multiply the old denominator by to get the new, you must multiply the old numerator by the same number to get the new numerator. We call that finding equivalent ratios. We talked about that in our ratios and proportions unit, finding equal or equivalent ratios. After you get common denominators and you make the new numerators equivalent, or make the fractions equivalent by getting the new numerators, you want to add or subtract your numerators, and you would leave your denominators the same. Always simplify if possible. So if your answer is not in simplest form, simplify it. Now we're going to talk about multiplying fractions. When we're multiplying fractions, you want to multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. So on this one, all you have to do is just multiply straight across numerators and denominators and then simplify if possible. And when you're dividing fractions, we often like to do the keep, change, flip method. You keep the first fraction, change division to multiplication, and flip the second fraction upside down, which is finding the reciprocal. So reciprocal is a fancy word of meaning the second fraction flipped. When you're adding or subtracting mixed numbers, you still want to get a common denominator for the fractions. Then you want to add or subtract the whole numbers, and you want to remember to simplify. If you are subtracting and the first whole number is smaller than the second whole number, you have to borrow. Or it'll put you into a negative. So there's rules for that as well. Like we're going to use your integer rules. for that. And we're going to spend some time in class going over those. Real numbers. Rational numbers is any number that can be expressed as a fraction. We also have irrational numbers, which is not on here, and irrational numbers are numbers that cannot be expressed as a fraction. And then integers. Integers are rational numbers, and a negative sign on integers means opposite of. So whenever you see a negative sign, it means opposite of. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next one. Now we're going to focus on decimals, and decimals is on the next sheet in your red notebook. When you're adding and subtracting decimals, always line up the decimal point, okay? If there's a blank spot, you want to insert 0 as a placeholder. When you're multiplying decimals, you multiply the same as if you were doing whole numbers. You don't have to line up the decimal points, but you want to figure out where you place the decimal point, you want to count how many numbers are behind the decimal points in the entire problem and move that decimal as many places to the left in your answer. When you're dividing decimals, the dividend is the number to be divided. The divisor is the number you are dividing by, and the quotient is the answer. So here's how to divide. Here's your how-to. Step 1, write out the problem in long division form. Step 2, move the decimal of the divisor right until you have a whole number. Step 3, move the decimal of the dividend to the right the same number of positions. Then you would divide, bringing the decimal straight down. All right, and that is how to with rational numbers. It's going to be a lot more of just practice that we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing quite a bit of practice in class, but if you need to rewatch this video and go back and get any information, you can. Have a great day.